Folks, we're going to get started. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Monday, September 29th, 4 o'clock. Would you please do the roll call, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Avery, Mr. Hetty, Mr. Pizzacello.
Here.
Mr. Moreland, Mrs. Chandler.
Here.
Mr. Croteau.
Here.
Mr. Degg.
Here. If you would stand, please, and join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're on number 3, approval of minutes. We have number A, August 11, 2014, B, June 4th, 2014. Excerpt of minutes attached. May I have a motion, please, to approve?
Moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We're on to number 4, public comment. We have a guest with us today, Miss Casey Traylor, Florida Not All Aboard, Florida. If you would please come up, state your name and who you're with. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm Casey Traylor. I'm from Palm City, and I'm with Florida Not All Aboard. I appreciate you all having me come here today and have a presentation about the All Aboard Florida project that we all are hearing so much about. And as you know, the EIS has recently been released. So we started out with Let's Stop Big Choo Choo in his tracks. Florida Not All Aboard was founded in February. We're a grassroots organization. We're comprised of residents and business owners. We were created to create awareness about this project because when I first heard about it, very few people were aware of the project, and the ones that were aware said it was a done deal. And when we looked into this project, we realized it wasn't. So we also hope to change the course of All Aboard Florida. Since February, we now have over 30 resolutions from every county, from Brevard down to Miami-Dade. And we also have a petition that has recently hit over 30,000 signatures. So we're very excited about that, and it's growing leaps and bounds every day. So, All Aboard Florida, who is it? They claim that they're going to be the first profitable railroad in the United States in almost a century. It's privately owned, ultimately, by Fortress Investment Group. This is a New York City hedge fund manager, and what they do, they like to pump and dump. You know, in 2007, they purchased Rail America and Florida East Coast Railway. They did what they're supposed to with Rail America. In 2012, they sold it for over twice the initial investment. That's what they should do. However, they haven't been able to do that with the Florida East Coast Railway. And interestingly enough, in 2012, that's the same year they started up the All Aboard Florida passenger rail scheme. What is All Aboard Florida? 32 trains. It'll travel from Miami to Orlando 7 days a week, 16 up, 16 back. It'll travel at speeds up to 110 miles per hour along this corridor. They'll go from early in the morning to late in the evening. What's more is there are no stops between West Palm Beach and Orlando. They have a stop in Miami, Orlando, and then another in West Palm Beach in Fort Lauderdale. They're also going to be double tracking the entire corridor with the exception of a bridge in Stewart that goes over the St. Lucie River. So if you can imagine, there's going to be 32 high-speed trains. They currently have 14 freight trains, which they predict to increase as well. And the EIS, they said that it'll expect to be 20 trains. So you're going to have 52 trains, and then you have that one choke section over the St. Lucie Bridge in Stewart. I have a picture here. It's just interesting. This is also in Stewart. Just north of that bridge, back in 2004, an FEC freight train derailed 30 cars going 25 miles per hour. That's the same track we're going to be running All Aboard Florida on. We hear all the time, and you can go right to All Aboard Florida's website, that there are no taxpayer dollars being used. They said they're 100% privately funded. It is not. We beg to differ. First, they have applied for a $1.6 billion railroad rehabilitation infrastructure financing loan. That is a taxpayer-backed loan from the government. There's also lease agreements in all the counties. For example, in Martin County, they lease $40,000 annual. That's paid with tax dollars, of course. But the big thing is the maintenance cost. I have Martin County because that's where I'm from. Their average cost to maintain the intersections is $60,000. They maintain 2 to 4 intersections a year out of their 18. Their latest estimate that they received from Florida East Coast was actually $100,000. And Terry Roth, our engineer, has said once they double track the line, they expect these maintenance costs to double. So from 60, they'll go to an average of 120. This, again, is taxpayer money. Our communities are going to have to figure out where to come up with this money. They're either going to need to make cuts or raise taxes. That's really the only way. So we look at All Aboard Florida, and we've had to ask the question, seeing that they've applied for a taxpayer-backed loan, is this going to be a feasible project with our money? Amtrak between Miami and Orlando reported a loss in 2013 of $46.6 million. Tri-Rail between Miami and PBI, almost $87 million was a loss in 2013. That's where we ask, who's competing to lose the most taxpayer money here? This is going to be a third system in the same market. Then there's another option for travel. It's called Megabus. The fares start at $1, and it actually goes from Fort Lauderdale to Orlando. The maximum is around $17. So they're going to be competing with this same market for a lot less money. We don't know the exact ticket price because they haven't released it yet. And that would be All Aboard Florida. So, again, just to reiterate, the RIF loan, it's taxpayer-backed. If they default, taxpayers are going to be on the hook, and we like to say it's a Cylindra on rails in the making. Senator Sessions and Congressman Ryan have a memo that they had written about a similar train project in California called Express West, who had also applied for the RIF loan. You can find the entire memo on my website, floridanotallaboard.com, but I did want to read you one excerpt. The loans are incredibly generous to the borrower. According to the FRA, direct loans under the RIF program can fund up to 100% of the railroad project with repayment periods of up to 35 years and interest rates that equal the cost of borrowing to the government. Interest rates equal to the cost of borrowing to the government. So let's say by some miracle, this hedge fund has figured out how to create a profitable passenger rail line. The taxpayers are still at a loss because they're borrowing it at the same cost as the government does. We're not making money over 35 years. Can All Aboard Florida obtain private financing? I've been to several meetings in the southern communities, Boynton Beach, Delray Beach. They'll stand up and they say, oh, absolutely, we have other private financing available. The commissioners have asked them who, what. They will not answer. However, we found it was very interested in their RIF loan application. When we received it, it was almost completely redacted, so there was not a lot of information. But we did find one sentence that was key to answering that question. Can they get private funding? This is the executive summary from All Aboard Florida. Due to the project's status as a new development and the required construction period and operational ramp-up, traditional debt financing in the capital markets is not feasible. Then, recently you may have heard that All Aboard Florida sells $405 million worth of bonds for their railway. This was in the southern communities. This was a junk bond deal at rates of 12 to 12.75%. But not only was it 12 to 12.75%, they had to put collateral on those bonds to get them sold. A lien on the land, rights to the passenger track, the ability to run the business if the project goes wrong, an offer to purchase at par if the project is abandoned before opening deadline. The investors, this is what they were quoted as saying. We didn't spend a lot of time looking at it just because we saw it as an equity play. And it's a bit of an equity story. Again, with all that collateral, they didn't worry about if they thought this project was going to be successful or not. Then it's followed up with another article from the Palm Beach Post in July 26. They actually want to take the government-backed loan and pay off these junk bonds. So that's what they want to do with our taxpayer money. The Cato Institute, Mr. Randall O'Toole, he stated he's skeptical about All Aboard Florida, whether it'll be profitable either as a transportation or a real estate investment, and that reducing the private sector buy-in by paying off the bonds is one more reason to oppose the project. And then we have to wonder, why is All Aboard Florida trying to keep their ridership studies secret? They actually sued FDOT, and a private individual, and another agency, the OOCEA, about releasing their ridership studies. Why? They want to use taxpayer-backed money. Taxpayers should know if this project is going to be a feasible project, if we're going to get our money back. If they want to keep that private, they should use private funds. All aboard Florida, you have to also consider our real estate values in our communities. There's been a couple studies in Martin County from the appraiser's office that properties within 1,000 feet of the track can lose 5 to 20% of their value. So here again, the taxpayers are going to be at risk just simply by living near the tracks. Our communities can lose a taxpayer-based money, so we're going to have less income coming into the communities. I let people know you don't need to live near the tracks. You don't need to be a boater affected by the railroad. The entire communities are, because when less taxes come in, that's less money for everybody. There's 3 bridges, the Fort Lauderdale Bridge, called New River Bridge, Loxahatchee Bridge in Jupiter, and then our St. Lucie Bridge here in Stewart. There's marinas to the west of those bridges. When those bridges are down, almost all boat traffic is at a standstill. I'm a boater, and I can tell you I have sat at that bridge over an hour before. The average is around 20 minutes right now for the freight trains. But again, I want to remind you that in Stewart, that's a single-track bridge. And why have I waited over an hour? Because they have trains coming north and south, and they will leave that bridge down until both trains pass. So it takes a long time. Now you're going to add another 32 high-speed trains to this system and more freight trains. And I didn't tell you, with the freight trains, Mr. Robert Liddell said they will increase the size of some of those freight trains to 14,000 feet. 14,000 feet, that's 2.65 miles long. Suddenly, we're going to have a lot of trains on these tracks. So that is a big deal to our marina businesses that are west of the tracks. And again, many of them fear that they're going to go out of business because who's going to want to keep their boat if they don't have ocean access with the bridges being down so much? This talks about properties that are in the counties here on the Treasure Coast that are within that 1,000 feet of the track. Indian River County here has 4,000 properties. Palm Beach has the most with 170,000 properties. So there's clearly a lot of properties that are affected and businesses. Also want to talk about safety. As you can see here, it's an ambulance waiting for the train to go by. And you have to wonder, the high-speed trains, yes, we've all heard they're going to go through in a minute. What about those 14,000 feet long freight trains? The EIS doesn't cover a lot about the freight other than it says that there's going to be additional freight, but it is certainly a big concern when all these trains are using the same corridor. Martin Health Systems, they believe that significantly increasing the number and speed of trains passing through Stewart and neighboring communities will result in additional roadway congestion, critical time delays, and increased potential for accidents. They said these factors could adversely impact the access to the quality of their emergency room and urgent health care services in the region. They said the minutes count. Our Sheriff Snyder, he said that a train impeding the arrival of law enforcement or fire rescue could easily be life-threatening. During an event such as a progress robbery, rape, heart attack, fire, seconds can make a difference between life and death. Increased railroad traffic would also have a negative impact on the safety of his deputies, as they could be in need of an emergency backup and have to be cut off by a train. All these issues our communities need to think about. Another issue is safety. All aboard Florida could be 92 times less safe than Acela. Why? Florida East Coast and all aboard Florida has 95% grade crossings. Acela, 98% are bridged crossings, so they're not at grade level with the street. It's not causing congestion, and it's not causing the problems that a grade level crossing would. Federal Railroad Administration Director Szabo, he recently said the safest at-grade crossing is no grade crossing. Today, we have 14 FEC freight trains that run up to 60 miles per hour on the single track. All aboard Florida will add double track with 32 more, or 3 times increase to 46 trains a day, which now it's actually 20. My presentation's a little outdated since the EIS came out. On the 125-mile FEC line between Miami and Cocoa, there are 353 grade crossings based on the March 20, 2014 FRA safety report. All aboard Florida will run at 110 miles an hour for 2/3 of that route, and that includes the 147 grade crossings and 79 miles per hour West Palm Beach to Miami. So the real factual documented difference between FEC and Acela is really is eye-opening. 3 crossing deaths in 14 years on Acela versus 71 in 15 years on the FEC. That's before we're adding the passenger trains. We always hear Acela is a profitable line. We beg to differ. The reason is Acela does not take into account any capital cost. You, again, can go on my website, floridanotallaboard.com, and we have articles about this very thing, about how Acela figures their accounting practices and why it appears profitable even though it's not. Mr. Don Phillips from the Train magazine, Acela does not make money. It loses money big time. The Reason Foundation also weighed in about high-speed rail here in the United States. The lines are major money losers. They're based on data from Europe and Asia that most high-speed rail lines in the United States are expected to lose substantial amounts of funds. Only the Northeast Corridor could potentially break even, and it would require the construction costs in the United States to equal that of the rest of the world, but typically our construction costs are 2 times higher. Only the Northeast, they believe, has the potential to break even. Obviously, we're not there. I wanted to also bring up quiet zones because this is a topic that has come up very recently. The southern section has said that they're getting quiet zones, and I know All Aboard Florida has been asking a lot of communities in the northern section to adopt quiet zones. I think it's just important that people realize both sides. Everybody likes the sound of no sound of the train. However, FRA found there were almost 3 times more collisions after whistle bans were established, and 195% increase. 19 people died and paid with their lives, with 59 people that were injured in 115 crossing collisions in a study in 1984 right here in Florida. Also in 2000, the FRA found 62% increase in accidents at crossings where train horns were banned. So there is a danger element to having the quiet zones. Yes, it's quieter, but you do have to realize people don't hear it. And with the FEC line in particular, it goes through the downtowns and bisects many of our communities. So you have to wonder and worry about pedestrian safety as well. In the first 2 years, they had another study after July 1991, when it issued an emergency order prohibiting whistle bans in Florida. The collision rates dropped dramatically to pre-ban levels. In the 2 years before their order, there were 51 collisions, nighttime collisions. And 2 years after, there were only 16. So the horns do make a difference. It's just something to take into account when you're making the decisions in your own community. Has anybody here heard of the Fun Train? Nobody. Well, this is Fun Train. All right. The Fun Train. It was here in Florida in 1998. It ran 5 days a week. It's going to sound a little familiar here. Between Fort Lauderdale and Orlando. And 3 days a week it went from Orlando to Tampa. And it offered passengers entertainment, movies, virtual reality arcade games, a tiki bar, and a 50-style diner theme. A lot of fun. This company also hoped to lure some of the 13 million vacationers who drive between Orlando and South Florida every year. But it went bankrupt in 11 months. It couldn't attract passengers. It does remind me of the quote from Albert Einstein, insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. But there is a difference between Fun Train and All Aboard Florida. Fun Train was a private company and it was privately funded. All Aboard Florida's fronting their project with taxpayer money, or they've applied to. You probably also heard, we like to say AAF really means all about freight. 80% of Florida East Coast businesses are handling containers at ports where it is exclusive rail contracts. There's going to be more freight. Port Everglades, a 43-acre facility, increased FEC's available intermodal capacity from 100,000 to 450,000 lifts a year. More freight is coming. Mr. Hertwig also stated that unloading just one of the new super ships coming through the Panama Canal would increase FEC's volume by 18%. More freight is coming. He said having empty 53-foot domestic containers and trailers adjacent to the ports provide more opportunities to transload import cargo from ocean containers to domestic containers. President Hertwig also told Progressive Railroad magazine that once the major projects are completed at the Port of Miami and Port of Everglades, the work on the Panama Canal is done, he hopes FEC's share of freight will go from the current 10% to as much as 30%. I hear All Aboard Florida in their presentations talk about more freight as a Trojan horse. more freight is coming. I also spoke to you earlier about Mr. Liddell had said that the trains will be expanded to 14,000 feet. The Panama Canal will accommodate post-Panamax vessels that carry 12,600 containers compared to today's ships that carry just 4,500. And as I stated earlier, the EIS did say the freight will end up being at least 20 trains in 2016. So what are we doing with Florida Not All Aboard? One thing we're doing is following the U.S. Coast Guard. They are going to weigh in on those 3 bridges. This is our bridge here in Stewart. And these bridges in Stewart and Jupiter, they were built in 1925. You can see they're really not in the greatest shape. And not only are they going up and down for the 14 freight trains, now you're going to have them go up and down 32 more times a day. FEC just recently had a bridge problem up in Jacksonville where the bridge was down in a closed position for about a week. So it's a really big issue. If that were to happen to one of our old bridges, it would stifle our businesses west of that bridge terribly. We are hoping that the U.S. Coast Guard will weigh in. They said that they will once the EIS is out, and they are currently collecting public comment about issues that are impacted from those bridges. The environmental impact study. I can't stress enough. This is I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's 3.5 inches tall when you print it all out. This is so very important for every person to please comment to the FRA about the impacts in your communities about All Aboard Florida. We also suggest you send your letter to Mr. John Winkle, who is the FRA contact. But the other address also goes to a company that they have hired to assist them with the draft EIS. So just send them both, or you can write, or you can attend the public comment meetings. There's going to be 8 of them in the area, and there's certainly going to be one here on November 5th at the Indian River State College. So there's different ways to make your comments. If there's something everybody should do, this is it. Make your comment to this EIS. Now is the time. We also advocated, go west, Big Choo Choo, go west. As you can see, the purple line is the CSX tracks. Right after West Palm Beach, after their last depot, it goes to the left and it still ends up in Orlando. It misses all the Treasure Coast communities. We talked to CSX executives and they said absolutely. We would need to upgrade our tracks much the same fashion that FEC is by double tracking them, but we absolutely would lease our tracks to them. We spoke with FEC and they own the land, they own the tracks. They're going to do what they want on their own tracks. They're not interested in leasing from the CSX. But it would be a very nice alternative. They could still run their 12,800 people is the maximum capacity on those 32 trains between Orlando and Miami every day and not have all the impacts to our Treasure Coast communities. So, All Aboard Florida, the other thing I want to stress, it is not a done deal. And we have Mr. Rusty Roberts here tonight. He's the star of part of my presentation. But as I said, I spoke with him earlier this year, and he told me, I believe that once the trains are up and running, people will get used to them, and they'll find out they're not as bad as they thought they were. Ms. Allie Sewell, she's their public affairs manager. When I actually wrote her about our issues, she said we need to learn to coexist. And then Mr. Roberts, again, has been at different meetings. We own the land and the tracks, and we can do what we want. This is the Florida East Coast. Railway, industries, All Aboard Florida. They're all pretty much one and the same. And as a grassroots group, we want our communities to be heard. We hope that they will care about the impacts on our communities and understand what it's going to do to us. There are no stops. There are no benefits. From West Palm Beach north, they're just barreling through our towns, and most of them are through our downtowns. There is no economic benefit for us. Lastly, what else can you do? Contact your elected officials, and that's the local elected officials all the way up to your federal elected officials, the FRA. We do have the power. Because of people contacting their elected officials, we've had Congressman Posey and Congressman Murphy. They teamed up against All Aboard Florida. They asked the Government Accountability Office to check the feasibility of this project, and we thank them both for that. Senator Negron, he vowed to block any money to All Aboard Florida for the state of Florida. This is, again, grassroots people contacting the legislators. We do have power, and it does work. Congressman Murphy and Frankel, they brought their local concerns to Secretary Fox. who is the U.S. Transportation Secretary. Again, power of the people, and that was very early on. What else can you do? Volunteer. We have volunteers that go out on the weekends collecting signatures. Again, we're over 30,000 signatures on our petition, and this is because of these guys that are out working hard at libraries, at green markets. You'll see them at events. These are a couple of my favorite pictures. I had one gentleman, his HOA won't let him have any signs in his yard, so he fashioned them up on his bike, and he rides around his community. And the other gentleman, he lives in Jensen Beach and parks his car downtown every day. So we've got all kinds of advertising going on. And lastly, please sign our petition. We have 30,000. We love to get as many as possible. We say 100,000. So please encourage everybody to sign the petition. And I just want to follow up. Now is the time again to comment on the EIS and make sure that Washington, D.C. hears us. So thank you very much. I appreciate you allowing me to come and present today.
Yeah, thank you for coming by. Commission
Welcome.
members, do you have any questions? Go ahead, Ms. Chandler.
Ryan, too.
You want to start?
Sure. You mentioned about having your voice be heard at the hearings. Do you have on your website the guidelines from that were, I think I read them, included in the EIS about what you need to say if you're going to make any comment and how those comments should be structured?
You know, I don't have that broken out on my website, and I will do that. It's a very good idea. I have the entire EIS on my website with the dates, so I absolutely will make sure that's broken out. It's a good idea.
Thanks.
Mr. Hetty?
Yeah, let me tell you some of my concerns. There has been by several elected officials a position that they were not against All Aboard Florida until they found out that they were applying for federal loans. And I think that if you look back at the history of this country and took away federal loans for public transportation, we'd probably look more like Haiti than we look like here in the United States. That federal loans for public transportation is not a bad thing. And the financing by the federal government of these kinds of projects is not a bad thing. If we have public officials who in their capacity overlook the financial viability of the project, then we have a different problem. And but because they've applied for public money, that doesn't, to me, that doesn't make them an enemy, and or doesn't make the project bad. The property value loss, so many things that happen that they threaten, your property value will go down. And I'm really not trying to be a smart aleck, but if they lower my property value, then that's going to help cut my taxes. So
That doesn't help the community again because they're going to have money coming into it.
I think the community is going to wind up paying whatever the tax bill is that's necessary to support the government. But rather than be concerned about my property value going down, I think we ought to reassess whether or not the trains coming through your town, whether they should pay some property tax on the property that they have. The additional freight in these 2,000 long trains, they have the ability to do that now, right?
They do.
Right. There's nothing in this fast train.
But this EIS, that's stated adding that second track, they're going to be able to add even more capacity and be more efficient. So that's, again, they're using taxpayer money, and you say public transportation uses taxpayer money. That's very true, but the difference is this is a private company that says they are 100% privately funded. They're not using taxpayer dollars. It's not true. They are using taxpayer dollars. If they default, it is going to be on us. I also want to state that it's over $1 billion more than any other loan that the Federal Railroad Administration has ever given on a RIF loan. Their highest one to date has been just over $500 million. So it's really something we should be concerned about.
I have lots of concerns about some of the things that All Aboard Florida has, and through the representatives have said that haven't proven to be exactly true, but I'm not going to beat up on them on everything. I'll beat up on those particular issues. The 195% increase in quiet zones, and the other study shows a 62% in quiet zone accidents. There's only one way that you can make this whole fast train quiet. And it's possible, and it's big wheels, big tires, and mufflers. Put that freight on trucks that go up the turnpike or up 95. Big tires and a muffler. But making the trains stay quiet as they go through town, there's nothing you're going to do to make them quiet. You can make them stop blowing the horns.
Yeah, I was only presenting what the quiet zones are, and it's so communities understand if they get a quiet zone, it could make it more dangerous.
The quiet zones are very clever on the part of All Aboard Florida, because if we insist on the quiet zones, then we, through our taxes, are going to have to pay additional cost for each and every single crossing in our community.
That's right.
Quiet zones are going to increase the taxpayer burden.
Yes, they will.
And from my perspective, you know what? All Aboard Florida, come on through. Do it as quietly as you can. Do it absolutely safely. And of course they're going to do it safely. They don't want their trains to crash either. I don't want their trains to crash. I don't want their trains to hit anybody. Neither do they. But I don't want our taxpayers in our city. This committee represents the city. I don't want our taxpayers in our city to have to pay millions of dollars every year to All Aboard Florida from now till forever, because we insisted on quiet zones, and that's the path the county and the city are going down, and I think it's a very bad path. I also suspect that if they didn't have that projected additional income from each and every single community, that it might not make the financial viability of the project look quite as good.
32 trips between Miami and Orlando. That's 12,800 at capacity people every day. That's
and the idea to go west on the other tracks. I'm just not sure that I'd be willing to support giving somebody else what we consider to be a problem. And up through the middle of the state doesn't mean it's up through where nobody lives or where there's no concerns.
It's far less densely populated.
Well,
than
it's not as densely populated, but yeah, and that does. And going west from West Palm does little to alleviate the so-called freight increase. And even with double tracking and to increase the freight in the quantities that were being told by those against All Aboard Florida, who's going to buy that freight? I mean, there isn't this magical market out there.
They're dredging the ports. There was an article that just came out last week.
They're dredging the port. They've got all kinds of plans to.
Well, they have exclusive rights at Port Everglades and the Port of Miami. They being Florida East Coast Railway, they are anticipating a lot more freight.
So our taxpayer dollars are helping to dredge the ports and to increase the size of the ports to support All Aboard Florida. So we're already, as taxpayers, we're already paying a lot of dollars. And
doesn't mean more should be on the line, because, again, they've applied for this loan based on a passenger rail system that's going to benefit the freight system. But they have applied for the passenger.
We haven't. Thank you, Mr. Heddy.
Yeah, sir. I have a kind of basic question. To me, I'm going to simplify it to, there are three types of transportation: boating, train, and vehicular. I'm always under the impression that boating traffic has the first right of way. Am I incorrect in that assumption?
There is a U.S. Coast Guard regulation that says that, but I can tell you our bridge in Stewart, it's controlled out of Jacksonville. We never have the right of way. We never have the right.
But there is a law on the books that says
there's a regulation that
says the boaters have the right of way.
Yes. There is a regulation, and that may not be the exact wording. I do have it, though.
So I am correct in that assumption.
There is a regulation that says that, and we've talked to the Coast Guard about that. They haven't weighed in real strongly with that particular regulation, but there is a regulation that does say that.
Thank you very much. No.
No, that's it on the questions. Thank you very much for coming by. We really appreciate you taking
You're
the time.
very welcome.
Thank you so much. Okay, next on our agenda, we have our city manager, Mr. Jim O'Connor.
Rusty Roberts.
I just wonder if I could have an opportunity to speak.
You want to take questions? Okay, sure.
I'd like an opportunity to make a statement as under public comment.
Could we finish up our other stuff first, please? Thank you. Okay, Mr. Jim O'Connor, our city manager, has a little bit of an update for us.
Well, really not much of an update, and I think Monty will be able to give you even more current information. We are trying to put together a meeting between ourselves, the county, the city of Sebastian, to talk about the EIS after everyone's had enough time to really digest it. I do want to encourage everyone to go to the table S2, which sort of gives a synopsis in the EIS as opposed to being overwhelmed with 522 pages. You can pretty well pull out of here the comments that are made, and if you want to pick a section, you can pick a section out here, go to the section in the EIS and get more details. But I think it pretty well gives and clarifies exactly the position of what the EIS has, the conclusions they have drawn. Stand ready for any questions that you
Yes,
may have.
Mr. City Manager, I have a question for you on the property tax for the rails that come through our community.
Yes.
Could you please give clarity to, does the rail company pay tax on their property and their rails and their equipment that's in there right away?
It's my understanding anything dealing with the railroad and the cars and the trains themselves pay no ad valorem taxes. And that means the tracks and the property that goes through there.
All right, thank you, Mr. City Manager. Any other questions? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. The EIS contained a couple of interesting things. One of the changes that I had not ahead of time noticed was they're planning on putting horns on the crossings rather than have the trains blow their horn as they're going through the town. That's a difference from what we've been led to believe. Is that going to change our evaluation of how we might consider quiet zones within the city?
Well, actually, it did until I walked in here and talked to Rusty Roberts, and he said that the EIS was a little misleading. They're not going to put horns at all the crossings in that type of configuration. And when he makes his presentation, you all may want to ask him about that. But the answer to the question is when I read the EIS, it said those horns would go in, except in areas that would have, the designated quiet zones that would pay the extra. Which brings me to the other issue, and people keep asking, why haven't we made application for quiet zone money? Number one, you've got to have the design of what you're doing to make application under those grants. You could write a letter and say we have the intent to do it, but those letters are going to mean nothing. The fact of the matter is the city of Sebastian did do some drawings. They have done it. I don't know who did it for them, but they had some drawings based on some experience. But you really can't draw a conclusion of what you really want until you know what All Aboard Florida is going to put at the various intersections in your city. So we have been very hesitant. The county did send a letter to Representative Mayfield and said at this time that they didn't have enough information to be able to make application, and we're sort of following suit with that because we agree with that position. We've been told that there is a possibility in next year's Department of Transportation budget stuff for quiet zones, because I think they understand that we do not have any designs, and the cities are not going to go out and, well, I can't say all cities. The city of Vero Beach, assuming that people listen to my recommendation, would not go out and spend money to design improvements at railroad crossings, which we don't even know what improvements are going to be made there. And as you know, we sort of have this $200,000 improvement hanging over our head that East Coast Railroad has sent us a letter advising us they may be doing some improvements in 2015 to a couple of the intersections. What we have asked is that they reconsider until we find out what All Aboard Florida, because they don't know any more about what All Aboard Florida is going to do than we do. And so to coordinate to make sure we don't spend $200,000 in 2015 and then 2016 they take all of that out. Hopefully we will keep from that happening.
Yeah, Jim, my understanding is that All Aboard Florida is going to make some improvements to the crossings. Hopefully they're going to have to, when they put in the second track and other things, are going to make a lot of improvements, and that we, the city, will have to pay for the annual maintenance of those improvements as we pay for the maintenance right now of what's there on the crossings. We just heard a program. Somebody make a presentation which said that the average cost per intersection for another town is about $60,000 a year. Do we have an idea what our average cost per intersection per crossing is for us?
Nothing close to that, but.
Yeah. Fair Monty would have it.
Monty Falls, Director of Public Works, and I think the information that Terry Rout had given was if a crossing is upgraded, that would be the typical cost for that. The maintenance costs are somewhat less than that, and it's based on a formula that's set out by the Florida Department of Transportation. They actually have a schedule that shows the class of the crossing, whether it's one track or two tracks, or what kind of signals are there, and it sets those out, and they could range anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000 or $5,000 a year for maintenance costs. But I think the number that was cited from in the report was for a reconstruction, and that's what Jim talked about. There's 2 crossings slated for reconstruction in Vero Beach next year, and that's a total of $200,000 in round numbers for that.
I didn't read that. The presentation I just heard was annual maintenance of the crossings, and those numbers were totally wrong.
That could be their cumulative annual maintenance, but for an annual maintenance charge at a individual crossing is in that $1,000 to
$5,000 range.
Yeah,
and that might increase a little bit going forward.
Well, it's all based on the size of the crossing. So if the size of the crossing doubles, you could double that at each one.
Okay, so it might be $2,000 to $10,000 would be the cost per crossing. We have 7 crossings in the city.
Yes, sir.
So we might be going from $7,000 a year to $20,000 or something like that.
For each one.
For each one.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr.
And the
Chandler.
cost, Monty, the cost for maintenance for a quiet zone crossing is dramatically different than the cost.
As I understand it, and I've only seen 30% plans, that's what's available at this time. Typically, you have a 30% and a 60%, then a 90%, and then the finals.
Right.
We're going to get the 90% next, as I understand it, which would be just ready for some final work. But once we see those, the cost for let's don't get confused with the quiet zone, because that's when you make the application to have the quiet zone. They're going to do the safety improvements at the intersection, whether we do quiet zones or not, as I understand from what All Aboard Florida has told us. And those maintenance costs will be what they will be. Then if we do the quiet zones, I don't see there would be an additional maintenance cost for that. Because all you're talking about is the maintenance of the signal apparatus from the arm and the bells and the lights.
And I've been told or led to believe that the equipment that's necessary for quiet zones will increase the cost of maintenance at every intersection where there's a quiet zone.
I think Mr. Roberts would be better to answer those questions than I would.
Okay. And Mr. City Manager.
I have a question.
You said for the citizen.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You said for the citizens that they should turn to S2 and save them a lot of work. My question to you, sir, is why didn't you tell me that 422 pages ago?
Mr. Hetty, you won't believe this, but I went through and looked at S2, and I was at about 125, and no offense, Rusty, that is the most boring thing you can really read, especially things you don't understand. And then I happened to remember on page, and it was like page 16 and 17, if you went through it when you found it online. And that's when I went back and said, well, wait a minute, this is, because out of the 522 pages, for me, the relevance was maybe 50, but that was just me.
Go ahead, Ms. Chandler.
Back in the winter, I think it might have been February, I had asked the same question as Don asked a few moments ago, and I was told that the answer was $17,000 a year in maintenance costs currently for the city. Do you recall that, Monty? I had asked the question, and I asked if there was a line item and if you could tally up the amount that we now pay on maintenance at the crossings within the city, and I was told $17,000.
I have a spreadsheet that has it on there. I'm a little reluctant to talk about our crossing agreements and license agreements because some are real favorable right now because they're really old.
Just tell me which ones there are.
That's why you're reluctant to talk about it.
So I do have that information, and I can just see if we're doing a comprehensive look at all the crossings, we're going to have new agreements on all of them, and all the costs will be current costs. But
And you're calculating the cost of the lease as well as any other costs.
yeah, the
The
license.
city might incur.
There's a license cost and a maintenance cost
Right.
for each one.
But bottom line, the FRA, the EIS, they're recommending certain improvements in the intersections for safety purposes. So All Aboard Florida will be improving those crossings. We will not have to pay for those improvements, but we will have to pay to maintain those improvements going forward.
The simple answer to that is every time you put a new little red blinking light on one of those arms, we pay for it.
You understand that.
And if you have to add another blinking light on another arm, we pay for that.
And if there's a horn on it, we have to make sure the horn's
And
working.
so when it comes time to rebuild that crossing, and we'll get a letter in July that says we're going to start in January, and here's what the cost is going to be, put it in your budget.
Which is what we're sitting on right now.
Okay, to rebuild these crossings, they're going to rebuild them as part of this project at no cost to us, I
At
understand.
no cost to us.
Okay.
But down the road,
But now they'll all be brand new, so we're not going to have a lot of major stuff over a few years, I would hope.
It's like a new
I
car.
don't want to be around, so-
Yeah, right. We won't have to worry about it. No.
It's like a new car. There's not much maintenance in the beginning.
What I'm pointing out, that we are not getting any benefits from this project. In reality, because we don't have any, it's stopping here, it's just causing us a little bit more aggravation. But it actually is going to cost our community more money on an ongoing basis to maintain these improvements that they're putting in. And that's what that's one thing I think we can say, look at. If we're not getting any benefit out of this, if our property values may go down, although I don't really believe that's going to happen too much, but we're going to have to spend more money to maintain this. Why should we have to spend more money because a private company is coming through and doing a project that's going to benefit them, not us, and yet we are going to have to pay. And I'll be talking to Rusty about this when he gets up here. We'll have to pay more money going forward. So then it's going to cost our community more money to do that. Am I correct in that?
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question. You had stated that the All Aboard Florida will be supplying some monetary aid to the community. Is that in writing at this moment, or just verbal?
Monetary aid.
Well, in terms of money that they're going to be spending in here, is any of it in writing, or is it just an oral handshake kind of deal at this moment?
We're talking about, I think we're talking about the jobs they anticipate creating.
Yeah.
And the individual who's part of that job may not live in Indian River County. They may live in Brevard County so I think they're talking about a financial impact, a positive financial impact in this report that spreads the entire 126 miles of track. It doesn't say that the city of Vero Beach is going to get any financial remuneration.
Well, at this point, have we received anything in writing from All Aboard Florida in any area?
The EIS.
Just that?
The EIS, exactly. That's where they have put in the financial impacts into the area.
Okay. I have a second question. For the record, what roads at this time are on the table, crossroads, to be closed?
The city of Vero Beach does not have any crossroads on the table to be closed. When Monty and the engineers walked, it was pointed out there are two two crossings that could be closed. One is the angle crossing that goes on to 14th. The other is 21st Street.
Right.
In front of the Chamber of Commerce. We, the city, have not asked for those to be closed, nor have we given any approval or any head nod that we agree with that. That was a comment that was made during that walkthrough.
Okay, thank you.
Who was that comment made by?
The design team looked at the crossings purely on safety aspects, and they said the safest.
They who?
I
I just
believe-
want it on the record.
I don't know the gentleman's name. He was with the FRA. That the safest, because of the angle and because of all the geometrics that were going on at 21st, the safest treatment for those two would be closure.
And isn't it true that the same group also said that the safest for any railroad crossing would be closure? Every railroad
Of course it is,
crossing.
yeah.
Yes.
The safest is
Yeah,
not to
just
have,
want it
is not to
out
have an
there.
at-grade crossing.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
Anything else from you, Mr. Foles or Mr. City Manager?
Just to let you know that I have tentatively set up a meeting on October 13th with the city of Vero Beach, Indian River County, and their consultant, and I'm waiting to hear back from the city of Sebastian to join that meeting as well.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, next on our list, we have our city attorney.
He's not here.
He's here.
Oh, there he is. I didn't see
Mr.
him.
Wayne
Hiding.
Clement.
Hiding.
He's going to give us an update of what he's been working on a little bit.
Wayne Clement, City Attorney, and I don't know, I was a little late, I don't know if the City Manager covered it, but we did have a meeting with General Counsel from Allboard Florida and their outside counsel and I think their lead engineer. Monty, is he their lead engineer? And because we have to thank Dylan Reingold, County Attorney, for setting up the meeting between us and those people and the county's people, and Sebastian's attorney was there too, to discuss mainly this letter that we received in Allboard Florida asking that all the entities sign off and make Allboard Florida a third-party beneficiary of all these crossing agreements that we have, which is where these maintenance costs and license fees come from. There's an agreement for each crossing that we've had many for, as Monty said, many for many years, and some are newer. But Allboard Florida obviously wants to have the benefit of those agreements, and they actually wanted us to, all the entities, to sign off on them some time ago, but the problem is how do we take this to our respective councils or boards, and the first thing they're going to say is, well, what's our cost on this, because we know they're going to be upgrading these crossings and what have you. Some of the things that did come out of the meeting was that they have agreed that they're extending any deadline on us agreeing to this making Allboard Florida a third-party beneficiary, but they will be getting us, and I don't know if Monty's had any more contact from them, but they're going to be getting us give us a better idea of what is exactly going to be done at these crossings, so we have an idea, so it can be calculated how much license fees and maintenance costs will be, so that we can then tell our councils so that they can know what to expect going forward. As the agreements stand right now, each entity is responsible for these things under the current agreements. They just want to make Allboard Florida also a party to those agreements. One thing that, I don't know if Monty touched on this, they did mention that in our area, in any area, the extent of the improvements they will make to their right-of-way and the crossings has a lot to do with the speed. And I think the number I heard was 79 miles an hour. Was that what it was?
In here?
Right, but anything over 79, they were going to have to seal the corridor, basically. So it looked like we may very well have pretty much a sealed corridor in this area. And we were told, and of course they warned us they would never put this in writing, but that the improvements they make may very well allow us to meet the requirements for quiet zone.
Thank you.
If I were on city council, I would make a motion to agree to give them, assign them third-party beneficiary. And I think that sounds like a fine idea. And the cost for that is they pick up the cost of the maintenance.
Well,
Forever.
Well,
We'll give them
that's
third-party
certainly a good-
beneficiaries, you pick up the cost.
That's certainly a good argument to say.
I
Well,
like-
look, you pay the differential then, if you want to make these improvements.
Differential, whose side you on? I hadn't paid the whole, the whole
That's not
thing.
going to happen. They have exist. In other words,
Why?
even if we didn't agree to make All Board Florida, this is just an example. They would argue that FEC will make the improvements and then just bill us, which they can do under the current contract.
There's something they
is
want,
what they
there's
would
something
argue.
they can pay for.
We have
They
another
give back.
question. A question, Wayne. What kind of a negotiating position do we have? You're basically saying they could just make the improvements and just continue to bill us for whatever the cost of those maintenance
In
are?
theory, and I'm
In
sure
theory,
they could argue that under the current contracts, they can improve the rights of way, their rights of way in the crossings, however they need to meet their requirements, and basically.
Now, say we refuse to extend the contracts. Are the contracts ever never ending? Every contract I ever seen has an ending date. They go for a period of time. Are these closed ended?
I think these are pretty open-ended.
Are these open ended contracts?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't sign them, you don't get the crossing.
In other words, if we don't sign them, they're going to close all the crossings.
They
They have a
would
right to do that?
It's
Politically, you think they do that?
It's a privilege to go
I
over
don't
that
think
track.
so.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, what kind of a bargaining position do we have on the argument that because they're putting through a high-speed train, all these upgrades are required because of their new use of this right-of-way, that why should we have to, when we made agreements, we were making agreements based on crossing of a particular use, and we're willing to maintain those for that use. But now that they've made a dramatic change, don't we have a argument
Absolutely.
that might stand the test of a legal mediation or something like that?
Well, they're governed by the contracts. And
I understand. We are governed by the contract. They're governed by the
understand
contract.
the contracts are written by the railroad.
But the contracts were written by the railroads. Why don't we write up our own contract and have them sign it?
We want to cross their property. That's
Well, I
the
understand
problem.
that, which they got free from the United States government, by the way.
Well, I don't know. I wasn't around here back then.
Well, I'm just telling you, all the railroads got their rights away. They never paid for it. They got it free from the United States government at the time. And so in a situation, I just want to put us in the best bargaining position if we're going to redo contracts.
Well, there's no redoing of the contracts. It's just making All Board Florida a third-party beneficiary to the existing contract.
The existing contracts.
Right. I don't think they have an incentive to redo the contracts, not yet anyway.
So right now, FEC is the beneficiary, third-party beneficiary, All Board
They
Florida.
are the beneficiary.
Okay. So we could say that if All Board Florida is not the beneficiary, then maybe they won't, how can they be operating on
See,
the tracks?
one of the important things is assignment of liability for accidents and what have you. That's
Exactly.
all part of those
I understand that.
those contracts too.
I mean, we're trying to protect the city from
Absolutely.
increased costs going forward, and I want to see what kind of a legal argument we have, what kind of a pressure point or something we might have to get a resolution that says, look, you're paying umpty millions of billions of dollars to do this project. You're making huge investments in upgrading this stuff, and now you want to push the maintenance of these things on to the local governments who are getting no benefit from this. I mean, that's an argument we should be pursuing as strongly as possible.
Certainly. Yeah.
And Wayne, you can present a legal argument that they can close down the crossings, and we could argue with that for a long time. But as a practical matter, there's not a chance in hell that a railroad could close down the crossings in a given town. Not a chance in hell. Wouldn't happen. Couldn't happen.
Don't know.
Well, it would be an interesting test, but we're not there yet. We're still negotiating.
Well, I think that you'd find some very unpleasant things happening to the railroad if you close down towns up and down.
Of course.
There'd be some unpleasant things happening.
But if you
It
have
wouldn't
contracts,
happen.
but
I'm sure they want to cooperate with us as much as we want to cooperate.
They would also go to court and have other kinds of things done. So I'm just saying we need contracts that are redone in a way that does not harm the city, and that's all my concern is. I want something legally in place, but I think we have a good bargaining position, which we should make the most of.
Negotiation. You got to have good
Well, like I said,
negotiators.
they're supposed to get us back more information so that we can
Right.
go
Exactly.
forward, and Monty and
Exactly.
his people can do their calculations and what have you.
We have one more question for our city
Yeah,
attorney.
the word written contract has come up over and over again. Is there any part of this process that is still in the oral stage with no initialing or
Which process?
open? The whole thing, crossings, monies, anything.
The
Is
only
it all
thing-
in writing or is it oral at
Yeah,
this
no,
point?
the-
What percentage?
Yeah, the only thing I've been involved in specifically are the crossing agreements because of the request by All Board Florida to make them a third-party beneficiary, and that's all written.
Because what
We
I
have
like, I want something in writing to study. Oral and a handshake, wonderful thing. Except I like it in writing. So
In fact, I think you had the letter from All Board Florida that was
Yes.
requesting the status of third-party beneficiary. I think you already have gotten that.
Right.
But the rest of it is just the crossing agreements.
I'm going beyond that. I understand that.
If
I'm
you want
talking
crossing
about
agreements,
the whole process.
I mean,
Are we
you're
still
welcome to copy.
talking, or is everything committed to writing at this point?
It's all written contracts.
Yeah, all
From A to Z. There's
Yeah.
nothing left out.
There's an
No
agreement. There should be
dangling
an agreement for each
participles.
crossing.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I'd like to see a copy of a crossing agreement so I can see exactly what we're talking about in terms of our legal situation.
Place to go.
And I applaud everything you're doing to try to protect the city legally as best we can. So I'm just going to try to help.
Any other questions
When
from the commission?
you get that out to him, that agreement, have
We'll
Tammy.
we'll send them to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Next on our list is Mr. Phil Matson. He's our NPO Staff Director. He's going to give us an update. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As always, it's a pleasure to be here. And it's been an eventful couple of weeks, to say the least. Let's start off. The county did take an official position. They had implied what their position was, but they took a formal vote against All Aboard Florida about a week ago at one of their Board of County Commission meetings. The EIS, everyone knows about it at this point. Probably everyone has a copy. Let me bring out a couple of points that bear repeating that I've heard already. First of all, there is a public meeting schedule. It's on the county's website. It's on the MPO's website. If it's not on the city's website, it probably will be. The local meetings, obviously in Vero Beach, we have probably the most convenient meeting at the Richardson Center out on State Road 60. That's November 5th from 3:30 to 7. If you can't make that meeting, there are meetings in the Kane Center in Stewart, 3:30 to 7 as well, October 30th, and another meeting November 6th in Port St. Lucie at the Port St. Lucie Civic Center. It's November 6th, also 3:30 to 7. If you have comments on the EIS, we are directed to send them to John Winkle of the Federal Rail Administration. His title is Transport Industry Analyst. That's John Winkle, and the email address that we've been given, and I'm sure the city can flash it again on their screen later or put it on their website, aaf_comments@vhb.com. And that's the official website that we've been directed to, or email address to send our comments to. One thing I'll bring out that I didn't hear today, when we were out in the field back in July, a diagnostic team which consisted of representatives of All Aboard Florida, and I think it was Michael Lefevre who was head of that team from All Aboard, took the All Aboard side and met with a Federal Rail Administration representative, Frank Fry, and a number of local officials accompanied him, Monty Falls, myself. Most of us, it was a sight to see county staff in jeans and, the grungiest T-shirts we had. Although some dignified members had a suit on, and a tie. But anyway. The diagnostic review report has been completed, and I just received a copy of it this week. And it pretty much corroborates what we have heard and what Mr. Falls had presented earlier, that the recommendation from the FRA for closure is those two crossings that we've mentioned earlier. So I got that, a secondhand copy was forwarded to me, so the MPO is in the process of forwarding it around. Finally, we will be, let's see, pretty much all I wanted to mention. We have our county team taking a look at the environmental impact statement, making comments on it, give you an idea of the kind of technical review our consultants are doing. They are getting sound equipment. They're getting ambient noise levels of the existing trains. Because keep in mind, an impact statement is an impact over and above what we're experiencing now. Right now, there is noise, there are horns, there is vibration. So the county's trying to collect some data to see what that baseline level is, how well it corresponds to what's documented in the EIS, and then get a basis of comparison for purposes of their comments that they plan to make. But once again, that's I urge you all to be, active in this process. I think everyone welcomes it, and I will be happy to answer questions, or you could forward them to me through your chairman.
Ms. Chairman,
I would just say, Phil, to you what I said to Mrs. Traylor, that when you go around and you're asking people to be responsive and respond to the EIS at the hearing or in writing, that you also mentioned that there are guidelines about how to do that. And that people just can't simply expect that their voice is really going to be heard if they get up and say, oh, I oppose this, I think it's going to be noisy. That isn't what they're going to be looking for. So I think if you could make available those guidelines on the county's website, if the city would do the same thing and others would do the same thing, I think it'll be very valuable. And then people will not feel that they're wasting their time, because otherwise all they will do is say thank you very much.
I want to make a statement. This past Saturday, while up in New Jersey, I took a train, and the Amtrak train came by real quickly, and the whiz and the roar. I suggest that when you do these decibel studies, that you find a train that's going 110 miles per hour and see what it comes back number-wise. I think you might be shocked.
Yeah, Phil, there's one thing I'd like to mention. There was an omission in the EIS, and one of the things that we want to comment on, I think, are things that the EIS did not identify as having an impact. And I looked at archaeological sites, and we have a very well-known, nationally known archaeological site here in Vero Beach called the Ice Age Committee is doing it. It's the Zero Man site. It was not mentioned in the EIS. The Zero Man site goes across the railroad. It's on both sides of the railroad track. And they did some borings, and they know that they've got undisturbed land that was Ice Age dated, and on both sides. And yet this was not even mentioned as an archaeological site impacted by the railroad in the EIS. The fact that you have a specific thing that the EIS did not identify raises the question of whether or not they've missed some other stuff. And we make comments, we should be including those kinds of things. I just want to add that so the county has that in their quiver as something that could be commented that was missed in the EIS.
Okay, thank you.
And Phil, the public, I think, is probably misinformed with respect to the public information meetings that are going to be held. These are public information meetings put on by All Aboard Florida. All Aboard Florida is going to be there to distribute information to the public. This is not a public hearing like this meeting where the public can come in and talk for hours on end. This is a public information presented by All Aboard Florida. It's their meeting. We really are not going to have the opportunity that the public thinks they're going to have to stand up and make comments to everybody at the meeting.
I think, though, your point is good. I think the FRA, if I can correct you, is holding these public information meetings, the Federal Rail Administration. I'm not exactly sure what their protocols are for interaction. I'm sure there'll be some opportunity to ask questions.
The Federal Rail also put out the EIS, but the EIS was paid for, and All Aboard Florida did this and presented it to them.
If I may quote,
presented it to us.
If I may quote from the FRA, the meetings will consist of informational stations where the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and discuss the DEIS with FRA and project staff, and a station to provide comments on the DEIS.
Okay.
Right. So there's a station. So there's a station where they can go provide comments. Right. That's different than this type of meeting where the public can get up, everyone can hear what they have to say, and it's televised.
I wasn't disagreeing with you, Brian. I was just wanting to make it specific what it was going to be.
Right. I just want the public to, if they attend, I don't want them to be misled or to be disappointed when they get there.
Exactly. That's why I read it. I think it's really important for the public to understand, because they're so used to, especially in this county, of coming forth at all of these meetings where they can be heard. This particular meeting is going to be set up just like what Mr. Hetty was explaining. You go in, you can ask your questions, you go over to the table. There's going to be comment cards there for you to fill out.
Right.
To put it very simply, your verbiage that you can give out. Let's say you're extremely upset about the project or you love the project. That verbiage is not going to be carried back. The comment card that is there that they provide, that's what they will take back, and they will sift through that. So people really need to understand that. To make your comments and your concerns, excuse me, your concerns known, there is a process that the Federal Rail Administration laid out, and that process must be followed according to their rules. Mr. Mattson?
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Mattson.
Yes, ma'am. Come right up and state your name and address for the record, and feel free to ask your question.
My name is Olska Forbes, and I'm a property owner in downtown Vero Beach. When you said that we just received the diagnostic report that Mr. Falls and some of the other people from our county went to, is that been made public for us yet? Are we allowed to see that?
Yeah.
I mean, is it available someplace?
He'll answer you. Yes, ma'am. He'll answer. He's right behind you.
Let me speak into the mic if I may.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everything we do is actually public, and we were toying with how to distribute it. I wasn't the first recipient. I got it secondhand. Jim, did you get a copy of the diagnostic report? Like a couple of days ago.
Oh, no, not a couple of days ago. Hadn't seen that.
Okay, it was like Thursday or Friday of last week when I got my copy. So I'll be happy to make sure the city gets copies and distributes it as they
There's
can.
a question I have specifically about the property that we lease.
Here we go. Sorry, Elsie.
That we pay a lease. The city pays a lease for some of the parking behind the city-owned property. I'd like to know if that was included in the diagnostic at the time that they were walking up and down the right-of-way.
Monty
We
will
weren't
answer.
allowed to attend the right-of-way, the meeting, and I
You're right.
understand that. You don't need 100 people walking around trailing behind the people that are trying to write this down. But I have also heard that there's some discussion about not having that parking available anymore. Just a clarification, please.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I'm sure it's very much so in Stewart. They have leases, and I don't know much about Fort Pierce. I think Stewart leases or pays some kind of a lease for some of their parking, right? Right. I don't know what our number is, but I know we have some. And of course, I'm greatly concerned because I have property adjacent. We've used that property for overflow of parking of employees.
We will get the answer.
Thank
Because
you.
your question is on record, and I'll square it away and get the answers for you when they're available. Mr. Falls?
The diagnostic review didn't specifically address the leased area. It was just to look at what improvements were planned for the corridor. I don't know if the 30% plans are detailed enough to see if that second track impacts that leased area, but I'll do the best I can to find out.
Okay. Whether or not it really is in that report, that's something that the public should know about. And I think the public has been told over and over again that there's going to be like a 5 to 10, maybe 15% reduction in value of properties. I beg to differ with that, but I'm just saying that you can't throw those numbers out without some background
Understood.
of where you're getting those numbers from. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Rusty wanted to.
And I'm going to let, we're all good on questions. Have Mr. Rusty Roberts come up. He had a couple of comments that he would like to make. Come right up, sir. State your name and who you're with and your address.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Rusty Roberts with All Aboard Florida, 8529 South Park Circle, Orlando. I've changed my offices next door, so I'm trying to remember the number. I just wanted to thank you for having this meeting and continuing to get information about the All Aboard Florida project. I just want to make a real brief statement about the EIS and then respond to a couple of points and questions that have been brought up and clarify some things. The EIS has been stated, came out a little more than a week ago. We're in the middle of a 75-day comment period. Not much has actually addressed in the EIS with the presentation we had. It was more about the company owners, financing, and that type of discussion. I believe that the EIS speaks for itself. So I think the EIS is consistent with what we've been saying about the project. It is consistent both in terms of the benefits and the impacts, and I'll just go over them real quickly. The report shows that there would be minimal adverse impacts with regard to the All Aboard Florida. There'll be improvements to public safety, air quality, and noise associated with the implementation of All Aboard Florida. And for example, one impact that's often discussed, not so much up here, but certainly to the south of us, is the bridges and the rehabilitation of the bridges, and closest to us would be the St. Lucie River and the Loxahatchee bridges. We're putting in significant financial resources into those bridges to rehabilitate them, and that rehabilitation will result in improved operating times for each bridge of St. Lucie and Loxahatchee of 6 to 9 minutes, respectively. There'll be a minimum impact when combined with our other mitigation measures, which are outlined in the EIS, and which I'd be happy to articulate if anybody asks. According to the report, these mitigation measures will reduce the delays for boaters on the rivers, and it'll help reduce the queue lengths and the times for boaters as they wait for the bridge to open up. The analysis found that All Aboard Florida will have an overall benefit on public health, safety, and security in the corridor. It will have a positive environmental effect through reductions in vehicle miles traveled and the associated reduction in air pollution. There will be long and short-term economic benefits as well. And an associated benefit will be an increase in the efficiencies of the existing freight traffic that has been operating on that system for the past 40 years before passenger service was discontinued. As you know, the next step with the publication of the document is the public meetings through the comment period. We'll have 8 public meetings, 1 in every county. Some of you may have been around when we had the scoping meetings. We had public scoping meetings in May and June of 2013. Those were public meetings. We had 5 of those, and to gather input in preparation for the environmental impact statement, we have increased the number of meetings for this final comment input period to 8, 1 in every county. At these meetings, as you have already pointed out, interested individuals can view the detailed designs of the project, the specific features of the project, and they can ask questions of the Federal Railroad Administration officials who are there, All Aboard Florida personnel, and of course our planning and development partners. November 5, we'll be at Indian River State College, and I look forward to seeing you all there. As you know, and as has been discussed, we recently conducted, All Aboard Florida and the FRA conducted crossing diagnostic analyses at all the Indian River grade crossings. Those designs will be shared with the city once they're complete. Monty, I think we're going to see those in mid-December. The result of the survey and the report that you just read talked about from the FRA ensures that every grade crossing in Vero Beach and in the county will be upgraded with safety enhancements done in full accordance with Florida DOT and FRA safety standards. And as we've stated previously, I want to reiterate again that the city it will bear no cost to this project work. These improvements to the crossings will be 100% paid for by All Aboard Florida. The result of these improvements will create an exceptional level of safety with adherence to the highest standards required for operations of the type proposed by All Aboard Florida. We will improve the operating efficiency and the reliability of the railroad through investments in new signals, communications technology, and physical plant improvements to the bridges and railroad capacity. These improvements mean a more predictable and efficient operation of both freight and passenger traffic in the corridor. Our trains, passenger trains, will be less impactful as well. They're shorter, lighter, better for the environment, and cause less vibrations than freight trains. I don't think you'll feel it going by your building, Penny.
I hope not.
These improvements mean an overall less impact, and the details of those are also referenced in the IS document. I suppose everyone's received that document, but if you haven't, let me know, and we'll be glad to get you a copy. Mr. Coteau, you asked about property taxes, I think. Was it you that asked?
No, not me.
Somebody did ask about property taxes.
I did.
You did, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we do pay property taxes on the corridor. Those are centrally assessed by the Florida Department of Revenue. So the counties individually do not levy property taxes on a railroad corridor. It's traditionally done by the state, because if you can imagine a railroad that goes through multiple jurisdictions, how confusing that paperwork can be with different property values. So it's centrally assessed. Don, I see a question coming.
Yeah.
because it would make sense then if there's income the state's getting from the tax on the property that maybe we should try to change our agreement so that the state pays for the upgrading or the maintenance of the signals rather than the local taxpayer. Since we have no source of revenue to cover it, but the state does. An interesting approach, maybe.
I'm not going to go there, Mr.
I know. I know you're not going to go there, but I'm looking at an argument that could be made politically.
I just want to mention, though, with regard to the discussion about maintenance costs, and don't confuse. We need to remember that we differentiate between annual inspections and maintenance.
I understand that.
And so there's an annual inspection for every crossing that does come with a cost, and those low costs that Monty and the manager mentioned, that's a few $1,000s a year. The maintenance would be where a particular crossing needs to be rebuilt or substantially improved, and that's where you get those higher bills. That is not obviously every crossing every year, so the cities know that one or two may come up every year, and they usually budget for that. But the increase in maintenance in a situation of an improved crossing to the level that we're doing is not double. We know that there is a slight increase, probably, and we'll have a lot better idea when those final designs are finished, but on average those usually run about no more than 20% increase to the counties and cities. There was mention in the presentation about members of Congress who complained about the RIF loan for the Desert Express or the Express West project in California. Totally different project than what we're doing here. That project had zero collateral. They were asking for $5 billion in a loan. They had no land. They had no collateral. They had a wish and a dream. That is very, very different from this project, which has land, which has substantial collateral. That collateral is being analyzed by a third-party financial analyst hired by the Federal Railroad Administration to analyze the viability of the loan, and that analyst will decide whether our collateral is adequate for the loan at a net liquidation value. And if they decide it is not adequate, the terms of the loan might change. So you cannot talk about the Express West project in the same breath that you can talk about with All Aboard Florida. With regard to safety and emergency vehicles, I have to remind this commission that as of recently as 2006, there were 24 freight trains going by a day, only 14 today. The addition of the passenger trains going by, which we've already stated are much shorter, much faster, will have a crossing closure time period of 48 seconds. This is not a situation that's going to seriously impede emergency vehicle traffic. She talked about safety and deaths on the railroad and the whistle ban and whether a quiet zone would be more dangerous. I want to point out one thing. In the 80s, when the Federal Railroad Administration told municipalities, states, and cities that they could require trains to silence their horns, and that was done along FEC corridor by many entities along the corridor and in other train systems in Florida and around the country. Those silencing of the horns were not accompanied by any kind of safety upgrades at the crossings. So what happened was, in 1991, when the FRA came back and reinstated the whistle ban, made it a federal regulation that overrode any local ordinance, they said, but you could have a quiet zone if you do substantial upgrades to that crossing to make it safer. And those kinds of upgrades would be additional gates. Instead of 2 gates like this, you might have 4 gates. We've discussed it in this commission before, 4 quad gates. It might be a center median down a wall, down the center yellow line. Those are the kinds of improvements that are required under the quiet zone. That was the mitigation. That was the alternative, so that communities could have an opportunity to quiet horns again and do it in a safe manner. And I think, Mr. Chairman, I've done with my notes.
I have a question for you, please. On the tax that the rail company pays to the state, would you know where we can get the information from?
I suppose from the Department of Revenue. I don't know what it is.
Okay, because I like to get the numbers of how much in the last 5 years the state has collected on the corridor.
Yeah, certainly available to do that.
Okay. One comment. In the EIS, it was recommended, because it was mentioned by one of the presenters here today, that one of the bridges down in Stewart County or St. Lucie County was controlled from Jacksonville.
Yes.
And one of the recommendations in the EIS was that control be moved to closer to the point. In fact, at the location, and there was no commitment yet from All Aboard Florida to do that, or was there? Has All Aboard Florida agreed to make that change?
That's one of the mitigations we've agreed to do.
You agreed to do that. So most of those recommendations that are being raised, or some of the complaints that are being raised, are being addressed by All Aboard Florida agreeing to make those changes.
Absolutely. I think the EIS identified 19 or 20 specific mitigations in various areas. And you have to remember one thing, that we are installing, to remind you, because I know we've discussed it, positive train control, which is a highly advanced monitoring system so that trains can operate more safely, talk to each other, automatic speed reduction in case of situations where the engineer is incapacitated or danger on the tracks. And so those kinds of expenses are being put into the system too, to make it more efficient and operate more safely. On the bridges, in the New River Bridge, we've agreed to mitigation where it'll be operated locally by a bridge tender. The other bridges will have notification systems to boaters. For instance, you'll have an app on your phone, an All Aboard Florida app you can go to. You can go to the website and say, here's the bridge schedule, here's the train schedule. Next closure at St. Lucie River Bridge might be at 10:15. It'll be closed from 10:15 to 10:35 or something like that. You'll have an app on your phone that say the same thing. You'll also have, we're looking into another system, kind of like a weather band report on the radio, where you can tune into a frequency and you get regular updates, recorded updates of in case there's any issues with a bridge and expected next closings. And so those types of mitigations, and also a countdown clock on the bridge that shows that the next bridge coming. So if you're at dock, and you look at your watch and you check the app, gee, I'm going to stay here and have another beer, and then I'll go out a little bit later, or you're headed out. Coke, I meant to say, Don.
Yeah, right, because drinking and boating are
That's
going
a
together.
Coca-Cola.
Just the passengers are having beers. And so then if you're already en route, of course, you'll have the countdown clock and you can act accordingly.
Right. Well, that's that's very, very good to hear. One of the things about the EIS that I found particularly interesting was the analysis of how train safety versus highway safety. And that there are many, 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 many more accidents, fatal accidents in highway situations than in train situations. And many years I flew airplanes, and I also found that airplane travel is quite safe, even private airplanes, small ones. And yet, any time an airplane anywhere in the whole country goes down, small airplane, it gets all over the newspapers. And so the same thing happens with a train accident. But you get an automobile accident. And we have, thousands of people get killed on highways every year, and we don't hear. All we hear about the local ones, and yet on airplanes and even small airplanes and on trains, you hear about them all over the place. Even though, in terms of the total amount of transportation going on, it's still a much more safer way of transporting. And I just want to point out that I'm very, very appreciative of the safety work that's being done to improve and I was very happy to hear your comment about the quiet zones where when they prohibited the horns from blowing before they had any safety upgrades, and then we're looking at data about what happened there. I really would caution people who are making presentations about these things to make sure they get their facts straight before they make their presentations. I understand. I'm just saying, but there are other issues. I would just caution: make sure you get your facts straight, because if there's one major problem in a presentation in facts, your whole presentation then is ignored. So just be sure that you don't point it too heavily by taking numbers that you can't really support over time. Thank you, Rusty. I appreciate your comments as always.
Question.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes,
There was a press report yesterday dealing with the EIS that All Aboard Florida selected the consultant and also paid for the consultant. Is that a correct statement made by the press?
No, sir. I'm glad you asked that question. First
Thank
of all,
you.
let me reference this to cost to taxpayers, okay?
Okay.
Because there's always a question of how much we're costing taxpayers. All aboard Florida had to pay for the entire cost of developing the EIS. We did not get to choose who did the work as a third-party contractor for the FRA. We did look. We were able to look at the list of qualified companies. We were required to do the bid, to put out the RFP. But All Aboard Florida, FRA chose the contractor, and that contractor reported to FRA. Naturally, we were required to supply information to the FRA through that third-party contractor.
Well, I thank you for clarifying that, because very misleading. Thank you.
Ms. Chandler?
Sort of going off on that comment and adding to it. So Florida East Coast, or All Aboard, provided the information that's contained in the report to the consulting group. They determined whether or not it was going to be acknowledged in the environmental impact study, or who got to choose?
Well, I mean, the FHB was the company that did the EIS for the FRA. They coordinated with FRA. Ms. Chandler, now you're getting into areas that this is my first major EIS that I've been involved with, and I've not been involved in the nuts and bolts of developing the EIS. But I do know that there's a standard format to environmental impact statements. This is nothing new, and so the FRA sets the parameters in terms of what needs to be studied. Data has to be collected. It's not just collected from All Aboard Florida, but it's collected from other sources as well. Naturally, they're going to come to us for data because we're the subject of the study, and we are the only ones who have the data at our fingertips in terms of our operation that we plan, and in terms of and we might be required to have our engineers and go out and take readings of some kind and turn that into them. So it is a top-down project. But naturally, we can't be doing it in a vacuum. We have to be in discussion.
I've heard about the Coast Guard submitting. That they were able to submit information.
Sure,
and
in EIS you have cooperating agencies, and Coast Guard is a cooperating agency, and the Army Corps of Engineers is a cooperating agency. So they have their portion of the study to do, and other agencies.
And I think the City of Vero Beach and City of Sebastian and the county requested to be what do you call it?
Cooperating agency.
Cooperating agency, and were rejected.
I believe that's what
correct,
I understand.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's normal.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment before we have some folks from the general public come up if they would like to make comments on the accidents with trains. And this is stuff that has come to my ears. People know that trains and planes are safe, but this is also on the other part of that. When an accident does occur, it's a mess. Like if a jetliner goes down, it can take out a lot of people at one time. If there's a serious derailment with a train, you have a big mess, a big cleanup. You know, thank God they don't happen very often, because when they do, they can be pretty messy. People in this community, and this is what's come to my ears, they do understand trains are safe and planes are safe, but they're very, very concerned with the speed that this train is coming through our city and parts of our county. And these people are worried about it. And that's why this commission has heard concerns, about those issues. Does anyone from the general public like to come up to make any comments? Yes, ma'am, come right up. And please state your name and address for the record. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Phyllis Fry at 275 Date Palm Road in Vero Beach. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. The public, now's the time to raise awareness for all the work that you've done. I know that All Aboard Florida has had all of us running from pillar to post, interrupting our regular business that we have with the city and county, who also do on a regular basis a terrific job. We're so lucky to be here in this community, and we don't want it changed. We don't want it turned into something unrecognizable without our input. Now, when All Aboard Florida approached our Indian River County Commissioners in 2012, they began a long history of misrepresentations and omissions, failing to mention, of course, that their project would be at the expense of the taxpayer in the amount of $1.6 billion, with only rail cars and right-of-ways as collateral, which they do not own still, nor do they own land. Just to clarify about the monies being spent for the crossings, it is all taxpayer dollars, period. All Aboard Florida is not paying for anything. We are paying for it. Their business model cannot prove profitability. In fact, as earlier mentioned, they sued the Orlando Aviation Authority, the Orlando Orange County Expressway, the Florida DOT, and a private individual for just asking for their ridership studies. But what they did tell us proves that they have visited Fantasyland. They pretend that 10,000 people per day will abandon their cars and purchase train tickets. That's 300 passengers per train, 32 times per day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year. That is not going to happen. When asked about their connections to Disney, All Aboard Florida denied this to the Indian River Chamber of Commerce, who in turn told the Train Commission there was no connection between All Aboard Florida and Disney. In fact, 4 former Disney executives were part of a 9-person team leading the efforts to develop All Aboard Florida, including All Aboard Florida's President Michael Reininger, who was senior Disney executive for 12 years, along with All Aboard Florida's Chief Operating Officer, Don Robinson, who was senior executive for Disney for 30 years, including All Aboard Florida's Eric Clausen, Vice President of Design and Construction, and All Aboard Florida's Chief Marketing Officer, Julie Edwards. It's been proven that despite All Aboard Florida's claims that they are not all about passenger service. They are, in fact, all about using taxpayer money to develop their sister companies' real estate and freight, including Flagler Land Holdings and Florida East Coast Industries. Do you think Rusty Roberts, Vice President of FECI's Corporate Developments, while on his propaganda tour through our counties, just might, have been pitching for his company's freight expansion by selling us on the ruse of All Aboard Florida's passenger service? Meanwhile, in Boynton Beach, All Aboard Florida is pushing their new 184-unit high-density population apartment complex on Mentor Road. Does this sound like passenger rail service to you? No. It's all about transit-oriented development and the stronghold they'll have on our community using a 5.75% RIF loan that not only covers trains, tracks, but buildings to monopolize their form of development, squeezing existing businesses out and bringing in their own developers, their own construction crews, architects, and engineers. They will transform Vero Beach into something you will no longer recognize. Benefit only themselves. Does this sound like passenger service to you? In their most recent deceptive practice, All Aboard Florida made an end run around our citrus industry by arranging a luncheon with the aides of Adna Putnam, our Commissioner of Agriculture, lobbying for an exemption to a 21-day offshore pesticide treatment of citrus and produce they intend to ship in from South America. Does this sound like passenger service to you? When we ship Indian River citrus to Japan, our biggest market, one requirement is to guarantee that the citrus is free from the Caribbean fruit fly larva or live insects. This is achieved by cold treating the fruit during the 28-day voyage. It takes 21 days to ensure that the insects will die in transit if, in fact, one single hitchhiker happens to get into one of the cartons. Fruit imported from South America into the U.S. goes through a full 21-day cold treatment process as it navigates through the Panama Canal into the Northeast Corridor, into the Port of New Jersey and Philadelphia. But because the transit time from South America to Miami only takes 6 to 8 days, All Aboard Florida wants to skip the treatment and spray methyl bromide at their Miami facility after the produce enters our state. This is All Aboard Florida's unconscionable drive to put our citrus and agricultural industry at risk. It is but one more demonstration that All Aboard Florida could care less about anything here, including the destruction of our small treasured communities, our livelihoods, our quality of life, or our citrus industry already weakened by canker and greening. Board members of the Indian River County Citrus League are incensed. As one of them said, quote, "The citrus industry is the iconic industry in Florida, a $9 billion industry in the economy, one of the three legs of the stool, consisting of construction, agriculture, and tourism here that keeps our economy vibrant. Why would All Aboard Florida put that at risk?" End quote. Does this sound like passenger service to you? Rusty Roberts of All Aboard Florida was once chief of staff of former Congressman John Mica, who was on the Transportation Committee. They hired a key staffer for a congressman on the Transportation Committee that is going to have influence over whether or not All Aboard Florida gets their RIF loan. Mica's staff and Rusty Roberts served with the staff that is currently with Putnam, Commissioner of Agriculture. So they know each other. So All Aboard Florida called for the luncheon meeting, and that is how they are playing this game. As a reminder, Disney is no friend of ours. They are involved in this push to expedite the produce to Orlando from Miami to feed the Magic Kingdom. Although the list of reprehensible acts by All of Florida continues, I'll conclude with the environmental impact statement, 522 pages of denial of formality required as a condition for attaining the RIF loan, more lies, more misrepresentations, and foregone conclusion based upon Reininger's statement months ago to our city council, who said, quote, "Your community has no concerns," end quote. Allow me to summarize. The FRA is a bureaucracy created to subsidize railroads, period, and to justify its own existence by granting crony loans at the expense of the taxpayer. Does this sound like an objective, independent process to you? Can you say conflict of interest? The FRA is an enabler for All Aboard Florida, and the entire process is a sham. When I first began speaking before our councils and commissions throughout the Ship Base and Treasure Coast in 2012, I was educated about transit-oriented development. After attending the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meetings for 2 years, I was able to provide the facts to the public and our publicly elected officials and exposed their agenda. As a result, 3 counties and their cities voted no to 750's transit-oriented development. Yet, All Aboard Florida is ushering it in at an alarming rate. These are planning precedents that will convert your property and dole it out to All Aboard Florida. A recent bill passed unanimously to give FDOT greater powers for land grabs along the rail route. Strangely, it passed unanimously. And the studies for the property value declines came from 2 independent studies cited by the Martin County Property Appraiser's Office and are accessible to the public if they would like further details. We want businesses in Vero Beach with ethical standards, and All Aboard Florida has failed that test. They have only their own interest in mind, not ours. For those who unfurl the red carpet for them and beg for this, will be remembered as the enablers that invited the usurpation of our local decision-making, leaving us with no say in the future development of our own community. Fortress, FECI, and All Aboard Florida will be our deciders, and they will be measured not by what they give to our community, but by what they take. I'd like to thank you for your kind attention today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
For me?
Ms. Fry, at the beginning, you stated that the All Aboard Florida was providing no equity, nothing to back up the loan, except their right of way or something. Now, we had a presentation from All Aboard Florida earlier, which said the loan is going to be fully collateralized with property that they own off the right of way, downtown in Miami, downtown in Fort Lauderdale, and downtown in. They have a lot of land that's not on the right of way that they were pledging as collateral and loan. So have you heard that?
Or FEC.
Well,
FEC owns a tremendous amount of land,
right.
But
And my understanding
FEC is not
they're
applying for the loan.
But I understand that there has been a collateral offered for the loan, so that the loan is fully collateralized, as far as I understand.
It's not All Aboard Florida's property.
Well, it may not be their property.
So you're saying a third party is offering the collateral?
Well, I think
Not
the
all
loan
aboard
is being
Florida.
applied for by both FEC and all aboard. I'm not sure, but we can clarify that. Rusty's back in the room. We can clarify that. Because that's one of the key points you're making is that there is no collateral in the loan, but in reality it is. And one other question. You mentioned in your presentation that the citrus, the Disney wants to shorten down the citrus deliveries because they want to get the citrus to Orlando.
That's right.
How are they going to get to Orlando when the freight is not going to go anywhere near Orlando? It's only going to go up the East Coast and it doesn't go across to Orlando. How is that going to happen?
Okay, yeah, and you'll have to ask the Citrus League about that. You can speak to
They're the
Doug
ones
Bernini.
they're the ones that have raised that issue. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I would before you put it in your presentation, I would make sure you understood exactly how. I'm confused as to how that would happen.
You can. Yes.
Why Disney thinks that the increase in freight and the cutting down of the time it takes to quarantine fruit is going to help them in Orlando? I just don't understand it.
I made the presentation to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council last week, and Doug Bernini came over to me and said, "This is also a factor in pushing this elimination of the fumigation process. That Disney wanted to expedite this. So we know that Disney and the officers and officials are all intertwined together. So I'm not really sure of who is benefiting, but clearly the connections are there. And as I say, to get the real down to the heart of the matter, because it's not knowledge that I'm privileged to know, but I can tell you that this is what the president of the Indian River Citrus League told me.
Right.
So.
But if the loan is fully collateralized, then I would suggest that you be careful when you make your accusation that you can back it up.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And let's talk about that some more.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Mr. Roberts?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I have to make a comment. I think Ms. Fry's statement today is worthy of number one on the New York Times bestseller list for fiction. Everything she has said is totally misinformed. Her personal attacks are out of line, and I say her facts are connecting dots that are fantastical and imaginary. And I would just urge this commission to take her testimony as a face value as being completely fabricated. Thank you.
Thank you for coming back, Mr. Roberts. A quick question.
Came back for my umbrella.
Well, I tell you, quite frankly, when Mrs. Fry, whether you agree with her or disagree with her, and certainly I would disagree with some of the things she said, and I would agree with others, but whether you agree or disagree, to get up and leave the room during her presentation, you're the man here from All Aboard Florida, and I think that if we're going to have public meetings, so we're going to have the public make presentations, that I'd rather have you in the room and to tell me where her presentation was wrong. What was the personal attack? I'm not sure that I heard
Mr. Hetty,
that.
I heard the entire presentation. I wanted to make a phone call. I came back in, and she saw me standing in the back of the room. I'm not going to.
Yeah, I said I was glad that you came back in.
I'm not going to respond to her comments at all.
What was the personal attack that you?
I don't blame him.
Well, and here's the problem with All Aboard Florida. And what raises the biggest concern for me is that when we ask you questions, you turn around and you walk away and you're not going to respond to that. If these citizens have said something wrong, okay, then let's hear the counterpoint. And I'd like, excuse me? Now, the citizen from the back of the room says we need to move on to things that are important. Apparently, she doesn't think the things that I have to say is important, and I understand that. Anyway, Mr. Roberts, to continue, I think that All Aboard Florida would be better served if they answered both the citizens and the commissioners. Thank you.
Let me just weigh in real quick on this. These are open meetings. The Vero Beach City Council has us under a resolution. We're to go out into the community, we're to bring the community here, we're to hear from all. Everyone here, everyone is our guests. We may not all agree with one another on the issues, but I will say this to the folks from the All Aboard Florida Network. It is important when our citizens come up from our county. These are things in our city that are on their mind. It's important to them. They're the taxpayers here. We heard from Ms. Traylor from another city, another county. Issues are important to them. We can all be in agreement on this, I think. This project is going to have an impact on our communities, and our citizenry is concerned. We have people that are in favor of the project. We have a lot of people that have many, many concerns. So I would say going forward, since the EIS study is out, we all need to remember one thing: let's all be civil. We may not like what each other has to say, but that is what it is. This, again, is an open meeting. I like it that way. They're taped. I like it that way. Items are on record. All presentations that go on behind that mic, including Mr. Robertson, he already knows this, is we collect them afterwards. It's all public record. We have a web page on the city's site that has all these presentations. We have numerous things from all aboard Florida. We have numerous news articles. You know, it's an extensive list. And with that, I wanted to go into chairman matters, if that's okay with the commission. Okay, hearing.
You have a citizen.
I'm sorry, sir, come right up. Yes, sir, come right up. Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Thank you. Haynes McDaniel, 2715 52nd Avenue. And just a couple of thoughts while I was listening to the proceedings. Ms. Traylor, the Don Phillips writes for Trains with an S magazine out of Milwaukee. Trains, plural, yes, ma'am. And I do believe with all my heart that the safest way to travel, the most efficient way to travel, both human beings and freight, is on the rails. And I think that's been shown in a good number of studies. And when we hear about these planes going down, lots of people get killed. I took a trip last month. It's the first time I've even taken a trip across the state line in over 3 years, because of my wife's condition, and she didn't go. But my son in Tallahassee and I went up to North Carolina for just a few days. And the amount of truck traffic is just downright alarming. These big guys coming, they want to run over you. And it would look so much better if they take those trucks and put those containers on the rail and get them on up the road and be safer and more efficient and more economical for everyone. As far as the safety of the highways, I think I've said before, I-95 is reputed to have more fatalities per passenger mile than any other highway in the United States. And we do need transportation locally. I've lived here since 1961. When I first came here, there were 5 trains a day each way through here that stopped in Vero Beach that we could ride to Miami or New York, Chicago, St. Louis, various destinations. And we do need service that we can ride, even if it does go to Orlando. We do need it, could use it. If I were going to fly to California from Orlando, I'd rather leave my car in Vero Beach than pay $20 a day to park it at the airport in Orlando. If I was going to sail off to St. Thomas, I'd rather ride the train to Fort Lauderdale and pay $20 a day to park down there. And I think I'd enjoy the ride a whole lot more knowing my car was here. I think I could park it in downtown Vero Beach. It would be okay. Some other cities I might not feel quite that good about. And one other thought that I've had, the bridge in Stewart, Ms. Traylor, why did they build the place for the boats on the backside of the bridge if the bridge has been there since 1925, and there probably was another one from when Flagler built the railroad 35 years before that?
Real estate there, and frankly, over the last 50 years, we are used to the freight trade. Most of us have.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, they can't hear out there, and one of the things,
I'm sorry.
We can't have a conversation between. If you would address your concerns and comments to us, the commission,
yes. Okay,
and
I'm
what
sorry.
we can do is, if you have a particular concern, we'll try to get that addressed.
I've just heard a lot of complaints about the
bridge,
and I could understand being held up, but I just can't understand why the place for the boats would be on the back side of the bridge when there was a previous bridge that was built about 1890 down there. and it just doesn't quite all compute. But we really do need service here in Vero Beach. We have zero air service, and we used to have airplanes that landed here. You could ride to go somewhere. Now the only way you can get there is this way, and it's about the most dangerous way to travel there is, and it's on one of the most dangerous roads there is. And if we could have trains stop here, Amtrak's supposed to have been coming here for several years, and they haven't done it yet. Gentlemen, whatever we can do and ladies, whatever we can do to encourage service for Vero Beach is what we need. We know that the freight service through here on the rails is going to increase. We'd like to see some passenger service that would be of use to us, because there are places I'd like to go, and there are places I'd feel a whole lot better getting my wife on the train and going somewhere rather than having her in difficulty riding in a car. So whatever we can do to bring this about, I think would be forward-looking for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Traylor, would you like to respond to the question that was asked of you? Thank you.
And just let me restate as well that there are no train depots north of West Palm Beach to Orlando, so that's a big issue. With the boats being on the west side of the bridge and the marinas, since the 1960s, they have stopped passenger service, so it's just been freight. A lot of the freight travels at night, so it really hasn't impacted the boaters that much. We'll have maybe 4 trains during the day. And with 32 more trains going north and south, they're all going to be during the day. So now all of a sudden there's been a change of use of the tracks. So these marinas were built in the last 50 years. They didn't have this kind of impact when they built them. And there's a lot of real estate on the west side with boats.
Thank you, ma'am. And okay, I'll go into. Go ahead. Question. One more. Yes, sir. State your name and address for the record.
I'm Donald Hood from 440th Court, Southwest. First of all, I want to thank everybody on the panel for allowing me to speak, but also for being so nice to my wife when she had her injury in the last meeting. And
how's she doing? All right.
She's doing fine. Thank you, Mr. Hetty. I specifically wanted to thank you and Mr. O'Connor and Tammy Vauck, who's not here tonight, but you three went above and beyond being nice. You know, it really helped, and the service that you got her quickly made all the difference. So I do appreciate that very much, as well as the opportunity to speak. One of the things that you never hear, and this struck me as something that needs to be brought up. This gentleman was the first one tonight to bring up the subject about ridership in Vero Beach. Why am I here? I'm a citizen. I don't have a fancy blog or anything on the internet. I'm not a person that would put that kind of thing together. But I do want to be able to use this train if we can get it to stop in Vero Beach, especially after my weekend in Miami with my car. I will not go back to Miami ever again by car. I guarantee you that. And we do need some alternate form of transportation to get out of Vero Beach, to get to airports. I think we could all use an airport shuttle to either Fort Lauderdale or Orlando or Palm Beach International, one of those three. The question, though, about what do people in this county really think? Certainly the county commissioners never asked that one. I think there's one commissioner there who will remain nameless, but has pretty much taken his personal negative views of railroads and rammed it down everybody else's throat. The Press Journal did a survey back in March or April. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date in front of me. If it's critical, I can get it. But there was 52% of the readers said that they would use it if it stopped in Vero Beach, 52%. But that only reaches 30% of the population of Indian River County because the Press Journal isn't widely spread. I've talked to civic leaders about All Aboard Florida, and it was the first they'd heard of it. And these are not just people that fell off a turnip truck either. We're talking, one of them, again, to keep from embarrassing them, I won't mention their name, but they own several car dealerships. And they had never heard of this. And the more I ask about it, people are saying, what's All Aboard Florida about? Oh, that'd be a great idea. They haven't heard this. And yet they're already being told this is too dangerous for them, and it's being shut down by misrepresentation of facts. I can't argue with all of the statements made today by some of the presenters, but I am disturbed that some of them seem to be backed in fact and some of them do not. They seem to be hearsay. And I turn them off, just like Mr. Cartu said. If there's something that looks negative or doesn't look right, doesn't smell right to me, the whole presentation is suspect. By the same token, when I run across something that's counterpoint to what they say, I am in the same boat. For instance, I talked to someone this weekend who lives in this area on the Treasure Coast, unfortunately not in our county, but used to be an employee of the Long Island Railroad. And he said there were the same fears when Long Island Railroad pushed forward and developed rapid rail transport to different parts of Long Island and New York. And he says, you know what happened? The property values near the tracks went up 30%. They didn't go down, they went up, because all of a sudden it was a ridership issue when people found they could live in a nice town like Vero Beach and commute and get rides. The property values went up. First I'd ever heard that, but yet he was telling me about the fact. I hadn't even brought it up. He says, you know what happened? But in his stating that, it brought another point to mind about some of the values this could have for our county. Previously, I've given a list of 17 things. That's number 18. I didn't even think of riders from here commuting to Fort Pierce, to Point South for a job and coming home at night to a nicer neighborhood. So that's one I hadn't thought of. That would certainly be added to my list now of 18 positive things to this community if we can get rail to stop. Now, everybody's going to tell you, oh, they're not going to stop here. They're not going to stop on the Treasure Coast. We got to stop the choo-choos or find some way to derail this effort because they're not going to stop there. But no one listens. That's not what's being said. What the railroad they're saying is, we've got a plan. We're going to do this and this and this when we start out. We're not going to add 47 terminals to this thing on the off chance that we make money on all 47 of them. They're going to start with what makes sense, which is connecting the airports and the cruise ship terminals and their rail yards where they can shuttle trains around for the most economical shifting of cargoes, changing of crews. They change crews at Fort Pierce, I believe, as a north-south boundary between Jacksonville and Miami. So why should they go somewhere else? And if they chose to go to the west and use the QSX lines, that's a kiss of death for ever getting a ridership ability in Vero Beach or Indian River County or even the other counties, because they're going west and they're not going to stop here. So what's the advantage to us then by having them go west? None. I'd fight that one before I'd ever fight them from coming to Vero Beach. Absolutely. Another issue, safety versus cost. Now, this is one for this committee, because my way of thinking, the rails are pretty dangerous anyway, some of the crossings. We're getting them repaired, updated, fixed, whatever, even if it does revert someday to all freight. They could use the upgrades. I'm all for paying a little money in this county and having the safest possible rail crossings we can have, whether the train ever stops here or not. What's wrong with safety? I think we should go for it. There's a video on the internet showing the bridge at Roseland going across the Sound, and that's a very, very dangerous intersection just before you get to the Roseland Bridge. The engineers can't see where the highway crosses, and the people on the highway can't see the trains coming. All of a sudden, wham, they're there. So I watched this to see what it looked like, and the train itself is actually doing this as it approaches it. So safety should be considered on these types of things. It really should. One thing about all of these conspiracy stories, that it's all about freight and all this kind of thing. The only people who really believe the conspiracies are the ones who develop the theories. I don't see any conspiracy in any of this. If All Aboard Florida is in the freight business, why bother? They own the right-of-way. There were 2 tracks there for historical purpose. They took them out for economy. Now they're putting them back for economy. Heaven's sake, it's their own property. If they want to run freight, they're going to run freight. And some of the naysayers for the All Aboard Florida project, it would probably serve them right if All Aboard Florida was stopped, because the FEC railroad will then be all freight. And instead of having 36 short trains, you'll have 25 trains that are 5 miles long. And you would talk about stops then. And it's their rails. They can do what they want, as it's already been pointed out. So another interesting comment, this is just kind of by the way, I've saved almost every article out of the Press Journal since this all started back. Once the real estate agents and boaters start ranking this up in March and April, we've got a stack about this high. It's funny, it all died off after the primary, and it did not start up again until the study came out. And all of a sudden, bam, it's rampant again, and I've got another stack just in the last 10 days that's about this high. I know it's that high because we've had out-of-town guests, and I couldn't read the papers until yesterday, so I had to go through a stack, and the pages I have are this high from the Press Journal once the statement got. I kind of rambled around a little bit, but I think I've got all really the points I want to make in here. We want ridership in Vero Beach. All Aboard Florida has said in an offhand way, not on record, that they suspect that they will be successful. When they are successful, they're going to fill in the gaps. Fill in the gaps is other terminals. And I'll tell you what, I don't want to be part of a county that says, no way in hell are you stopping here because we don't like trains. Why can't they stop here? Why are we running them out? People want to ride it. Or if we don't know that, why don't we know that? Why don't we know what people want in this county? We're fighting it. It appears that we're fighting it tooth and nail to stop something that we don't even know what the ridership figures would be, other than that one little 52% icon in public opinion page back in the Press Journal back in around May. There was one other thing. Oh, what is wrong with a business getting a loan? Anybody here have a home loan? Good God. You know, the railroads are not doing anything different than you and I would do or other companies. The FRA is providing a loan, providing there's collateral to do that, 35 years to pay it back. So what if it's at a good rate? I got refinanced. I got a good rate. Is everybody against that? You know, businesses get loans, and they get federal money. The Small Business Administration, that's money, that's federal. So I don't understand what all this baloney is about the FRA giving favorable treatment to the railroad. Other railroads in this country have gotten loans. Why can't All Aboard Florida? Why can't they? Make sure you got one last thing. I guess that's basic. I'll think of it later. I don't see it on my notes, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to at least raise these questions. And I hope we can get some answers specifically about ridership in this county. I think we need to get the word out to people about what All Aboard Florida really is, not about what the environmental impact statement says, but whether or not they want to use it in the first place. Then we can address that environmental impact statement. If everybody hates it, then let's go after them. But I don't think that's going to be the case. You've already had young people address, well, maybe not this committee, but I know that they've addressed the county council, and we're almost shouted down. But young people do not even want to buy a car anymore. You know, the dynamics are shifting. The young folks would rather use mass transit. Oh, I know what it was. Our house guests. And we were here for 10 days. And he read some of the findings about All Aboard Florida that were in the Press Journal. And he says, these people just don't get it, do they? He said there wouldn't be any question of this in the United Kingdom would be going through without anybody raising a sweat over this, because over there it's needed. And right now, maybe some would argue it's not needed in the United States. I argue that it is. I want to use it now. I see a real need for it after my horror experience in Miami this weekend. and I think others do too. There's 18 advantages. I won't repeat them because they're already out in there before. I really get tired of hearing it said that there are no advantages to the county. If nothing else, the one that will be here, bar none, is improved safety at our intersections. That's worth it if nothing else. So it could also be a tourist attraction, who knows. Anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And
Thank you. Anyone else from the public would like to address the commission? Okay, we'll close this portion of the meeting on the public input. And before I go into my matters, and this information is online, when we first started out, All Aboard Florida did come in and they did present their model as far as how they came up with the 3 hours. They called it, I think they used the term sweet spot. They're based on getting the people from point A to point B in the 3-hour time frame. And right now, stops along the way are just not in that model at this time because they want to maintain that 3 hours. And I'm not going to take up any more time on this, but it is online. There are meetings there that talk about why there is no stop here. And All Aboard Florida and Amtrak, two different animals, so don't get them confused. All Aboard Florida stands by itself. My matters, your EIS statement, 75 days, start time September 19, 2014, ends December 3rd, 2014. And this stuff I'll put on our webpage. Here's something that the folks should take a look at in the document. Take a look at page XIV, how to read this document. It was very helpful. It's important for homeowners, business owners, and neighborhood groups. If you have comments that you're going to be making, take a gander at that. Next thing to take a look at, a lot of people are wondering, how did this project take place? Who were the decision makers of the day? Where did this come from? Go to page 8-1, Summary of Public Involvement Process. I found that a very interesting read. In fact, I'm not finished with that yet. There's a number of news articles that have come out of late, and it is a pile of them. I will be putting them on our webpage, so folks that are concerned with this project, whether you're for it or against it, there'll be information there for you to look at. Also, there's going to be links there where you can go look at more information. And I would ask my fellow commissioners, if you don't mind, at the next meeting, if you would bring your thoughts about the EIS study, things that are on your mind about, things that you've read. I know all of you have looked at it. Okay, let's go to members' matters. Does anyone have anything? Mr. Hetty?
No.
Ms. Chandler?
No.
Mr. Coteau?
Nope.
Sir, at the end? Mr. Frank Pizzacello? Okay. Our next meeting date is October 13 at 4 p.m. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Ken?
October 13.